You're sitting there, scrolling through your feed, and you see it again. Another post about someone's life completely changing overnight, a diagnosis, a layoff, a sudden death, a pandemic that shut down the world, and you feel that familiar knot in your stomach, that whisper in the back of your mind that says, this could happen to me any second. Everything I've built could vanish. So you plan harder, you save more, you hedge your bets. You try to control every variable, minimize every risk, build walls so thick that chaos itself couldn't penetrate them. You're trying to become catastrophe-proof, and it's exhausting, isn't it? This constant vigilance, this perpetual preparation for disaster. You've optimized your life into a fortress, and yet you lie awake at night knowing that no fortress has ever been impenetrable. You've read the statistics, you know the stories, Black Swan events they call them. Those unpredictable, catastrophic moments that rewrite everything. And the more you learn about them, the more you realize you can't plan for chaos. You can't predict the unpredictable. You can't control what refuses to be controlled, so you feel trapped. Because if you can't protect yourself, what's the point of all this effort? And if you stop trying to protect yourself, aren't you just being reckless? Aren't you just giving up? You look at your carefully constructed life, your contingency plans, your insurance policies, your backup plans for your backup plans, and you wonder, is this living? Or is this just elaborate avoidance of death? But what if I told you that your entire approach to Black Swan events is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what they actually are? What if the catastrophe you're trying to prevent isn't the real threat? What if your obsession with control, with planning, with protection, is actually the thing that's killing you? Not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, day by day, moment by moment, until you wake up one morning and realize you've spent your entire life preparing to live instead of actually living? What if Black Swan events aren't interruptions to your life, but invitations back into it? Let me tell you what's really happening here. What you call living right now, this existence you're trying so desperately to protect, it's already a kind of death. You just don't recognize it as such because it's comfortable, because it's familiar, because it feels like safety. But here's what you need to understand. The life you're defending so ferociously, it's not actually life, it's a simulation of life. It's a carefully controlled environment where you've eliminated so much risk that you've also eliminated most of the aliveness. Think about what you've sacrificed in the name of security. The conversations you don't have because they might lead to conflict. The dreams you don't pursue because they might fail. The connections you don't make because they might hurt. The experiences you don't allow yourself because they might not fit into your 5-year plan. You've become so good at avoiding pain that you've also become numb to pleasure. So efficient at preventing loss that you've forgotten how to gain anything meaningful. The philosophers saw this coming. Kierkegaard talked about it in the 19th century when he described the sickness unto death, not as physical dying, but as the despair of not living while you're alive. He saw people who had chosen a kind of living death, what he called despair at not willing to be oneself. They had constructed false selves, protective shells, personas designed to navigate the world safely. And in doing so, they had buried their actual selves so deep that they forgot those selves ever existed. Heidegger took it further. He talked about Das Man, the day self, the inauthentic way of being where you live according to what one does, what's expected, what's safe, what's socially acceptable. You become, in his words, fallen into the world, absorbed by it, lost in the machinery of existence. You're so busy managing your life that you forget to actually live it. And here's the crucial part. This fallenness, this inauthenticity, it doesn't feel wrong. It feels right. It feels responsible. It feels like what adults are supposed to do. This is what happened to you. Somewhere along the way, you started treating life as a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be lived. You began seeing the future as a threat to be managed rather than a mystery to be encountered. And Black Swan events became your nightmare because they represented the ultimate loss of control, the final proof that all your planning might be futile. But here's what you didn't realize. That planning, that control, that illusion of security, it was already costing you something. It was costing you presence. It was costing you spontaneity. It was costing you the ability to respond to life as it actually unfolds rather than as you wish it would unfold. You became so focused on preventing catastrophe that you created a different kind of catastrophe, A life where nothing catastrophic happens because nothing really happens at all. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're standing in a field at night, and above you is the most spectacular meteor shower the world has ever seen. Shooting stars in every direction, brilliant and fleeting, and absolutely breathtaking. But you're not watching the sky. You're studying a weather app on your phone, checking the forecast, calculating the probability of rain, planning your route home, making sure you have an umbrella just in case. And someone comes up to you and says, "Look up, look at the sky." And you say, "I can't. I need to make sure I'm prepared for the weather. What if it rains? What if there's a storm? What if I get struck by lightning?" And they say, "But it's not raining. There's no storm, and you're missing the meteor shower." And you say, "But it could rain. Statistically, there's always a chance, and I can't afford to be unprepared." So you keep your eyes on your phone. You keep checking the forecast. You keep planning for disasters that haven't happened and might never happen. And above you, the meteor shower continues. This once-in-a-lifetime display of cosmic beauty, and you miss the entire thing. Not because it didn't happen, but because you were too busy preparing for it not to happen the way you wanted it to happen. And here's the thing. Eventually, it does rain, because of course it rains. The weather doesn't care about your plans. A storm rolls in, and all your preparation, all your weather apps and umbrellas and contingency plans, they don't stop you from getting wet. They just stop you from experiencing the meteor shower before the rain came. If this is hitting different for you, consider staying. We explore these depths every single week. This is what's happening when you organize your entire life around preventing black swan events. You're so busy preparing for catastrophe that you're missing the actual experience of being alive. And when catastrophe does come, because it always eventually comes, your preparation doesn't actually protect you. It just means you spent all the time before the catastrophe in a state of anxious anticipation instead of genuine presence. Now, most people, when they realize this, when they start to feel the weight of all this planning and control, they do something predictable. They try to plan better. They read more books about risk management. They diversify their investments even more. They add another insurance policy. They create more contingency plans. They think, "I just need to be more prepared. I just need to account for more variables. I just need to think 3 steps ahead instead of 2. But this is like trying to solve the problem of drowning by drinking more water. The solution they're reaching for is the very thing that's killing them. Because every additional layer of protection, every additional contingency plan, every additional attempt to make themselves catastrophe-proof, it just adds more distance between them and actual life. It's like putting on another layer of armor. Sure, you're more protected, but you're also more weighed down, more immobilized, more trapped inside your own defense system. And here's what happens. The more you plan, the more you realize how many things you can't plan for. The more you try to control, the more you become aware of how little control you actually have. It's a spiral. Every attempt to achieve security reveals how fundamentally insecure existence actually is. Every plan exposes 10 more things that could go wrong. The quest for certainty becomes its own form of suffering, a hunger that feeds on itself, growing more desperate with every attempt to satisfy it. This is the trap. You think the problem is that you haven't found the right strategy yet? That you haven't optimized enough? That you need to be smarter, more prepared, more vigilant? But the problem isn't your strategy. The problem is the entire premise that life is something to be secured against. So, what's the alternative? Here's what you need to understand. There is a completely different way of relating to black swan events, to catastrophe, to the fundamental uncertainty of existence. But it's not what you think. It's not recklessness. It's not abandoning all planning. It's not pretending that consequences don't exist. It's something more paradoxical than that. Something that your mind, trained in the logic of control and preparation, will initially resist. I'm going to call it catastrophic presence. And it's the opposite of everything you've been taught about how to live a good life. Catastrophic presence is the recognition that life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. And that this reality includes catastrophe as an inherent feature, not a bug. It's the understanding that the attempt to eliminate uncertainty doesn't make you more alive, it makes you less alive. And that the moments when everything falls apart might actually be the moments when you finally fall back into reality. Here's what catastrophic presence looks like. You stop treating the future as a threat and start treating it as a mystery. You stop trying to predict what will happen and start developing the capacity to respond to whatever does happen. You stop building fortresses and start building flexibility, resilience, presence. Not because these things will protect you from catastrophe, they won't, but because they allow you to remain alive during catastrophe instead of just surviving it. In catastrophic presence, the Black Swan event isn't the enemy. The Black Swan event is the moment when all your illusions of control get stripped away and you're forced to confront reality directly, without the buffer of your plans and predictions. And yes, that's terrifying. Yes, that involves loss. Yes, that includes pain. But it also includes something your carefully controlled life has been missing: genuine contact with existence, real stakes, actual presence, the sharp, vivid experience of being alive in a world that doesn't bend to your will. This state doesn't depend on everything going according to plan because it doesn't have a plan in the conventional sense. It has something more fundamental, a deep, embodied trust in your capacity to meet whatever arises. Not because you've prepared for every contingency, but because you've stopped believing that preparation is what makes life possible. You've realized that life has been happening all along, without your permission, without your control, and that your attempts to manage it have been less about ensuring survival and more about avoiding the discomfort of not knowing what comes next. Here's the extraordinary thing. People who live in catastrophic presence actually handle Black Swan events better than people who spend their lives preparing for them. Not because they're protected, not because they're lucky, but because they haven't spent decades building a rigid structure that shatters on impact. They've been living in flexibility all along. They've been practicing presence in the midst of uncertainty. They've been relating to life as something dynamic and unpredictable. So when the truly unpredictable happens, it's not a violation of their worldview. It's just life, doing what life does. Now, I must warn you about something. You might be thinking this sounds reckless, irresponsible, even dangerous. You might be imagining someone who just drifts through life with no plans, no savings, no precautions, no consideration for the future. And I understand that concern. It's legitimate. But that's not what I'm describing. Catastrophic presence isn't the absence of planning. It's the right relationship with planning. You can have insurance without believing that insurance makes you safe. You can have savings without believing that money can protect you from loss. You can make plans without believing that plans determine outcomes. The difference is in the grip, in the attachment, in the fundamental belief about what planning is for. Most people plan because they believe planning will prevent catastrophe. They save money because they think money will protect them from uncertainty. They make contingency plans because they think preparation will shield them from chaos. But this is magical thinking. This is the belief that if you just do the right things, perform the right rituals, think the right thoughts, reality will bend to your will. And you know this isn't true. You know because you've seen people do everything right and still lose everything. You've seen the healthy person get the terminal diagnosis, the careful driver and the fatal accident, the devoted couple facing the unexpected divorce, the successful business that collapses overnight. You know that preparation doesn't prevent catastrophe. So why are you still living as if it does? Let me tell you about someone I knew. We'll call him Michael McCall. Michael was a planner. The kind of person who had spreadsheets for everything, financial projections for the next 30 years, multiple insurance policies, a perfectly optimized investment portfolio. He knew exactly how much he needed to retire, how much he needed to save each month, how much risk he could tolerate. His life was a masterpiece of risk management, and he was miserable. Not obviously miserable. He would never have said he was unhappy. If you asked him, he would have said he was being responsible, being an adult, doing what needed to be done. But you could see it in his eyes. This constant anxiety, this perpetual vigilance. He was always scanning for threats, always anticipating problems, always 3 steps ahead. He couldn't be in the present moment because he was always managing the future moment. And if you've been resonating with this, maybe it's time to join the space where we go deeper every week. You know where the button is? Then his wife got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Out of nowhere. No family history, no warning signs, just a routine checkup that revealed the unthinkable. And all of Michael's planning, all his preparation, all his careful risk management, none of it mattered. None of it could prevent this. None of it could fix this. He had spent years trying to make himself catastrophe-proof, and catastrophe found him anyway. But here's what happened. In the midst of this catastrophe, something shifted in Michael. Maybe it was because he finally had to face the thing he'd been running from his entire life. Maybe it was because all his illusions of control got stripped away at once. Maybe it was because, for the first time in decades, he had no choice but to be present. There was no planning his way out of this. There was no optimizing. There was just now, this moment. His wife, the hospital room, the reality of mortality. And in that space, stripped of all his protective mechanisms, Michael started actually living. He stopped worrying about his retirement account. He stopped checking his investment portfolio. He stopped running scenarios in his head about what might happen in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, because there might not be 5 years, or 10 years, or 20 years. There was just this moment, this day, this precious, fleeting, heartbreaking now. They spent her last 8 months differently than they'd spent the previous 20 years. They said things they'd been too afraid to say. They did things they'd been putting off until later. They were present with each other in a way they'd never been present before. Not because they learned some technique, not because they read a book about mindfulness, but because catastrophe had burned away everything else. All the planning, all the protecting, all the future-oriented, and what was left was just life, raw, real, immediate. After she died, Michael was destroyed. Of course he was. Grief isn't something you can plan for or optimize away. But something else was also true. He was more alive in his grief than he had been in 20 years of careful living. The pain was real, but the life was real too. And he told me something I've never forgotten. He said, "I spent 20 years trying to prevent something bad from happening, and then the worst thing happened anyway. And I realized I'd wasted 20 years. Because I could have been living with her. Actually living. Not just planning to live after I'd secured everything, just living. And now she's gone, and I can't get those years back." This is the cost of your war against catastrophe. Not just the catastrophe you might face in the future, but the life you're not living right now. This moment, this breath, this day. You're sacrificing it all on the altar of security. And security isn't even real. It's a story you tell yourself to feel like you have control in a world that can't be controlled. Now, let me give you another image. Imagine you're in a river, not metaphorically, actually in a river. And the current is strong, and you're terrified of where the river might take you. You're afraid of the rapids downstream, afraid of rocks you can't see, afraid of waterfalls that might be waiting. So, what do? You grab onto a branch hanging over the water, and you hold on tight, so tight your knuckles turn white, so tight your arms start to ache. And the river keeps flowing past you, and you keep holding on, and you think, as long as I hold this branch, I'm safe. As long as I don't let go, I can control where I go. But here's what you don't realize. Holding onto that branch, it's killing you. Not quickly, not dramatically, but your arms are getting tired. The branch is cutting into your hands, and you can't actually stay here forever. Eventually, you're going to have to let go. Either because you physically can't hold on anymore, or because the branch breaks, or because the river rises and pulls you under while you're still gripping it. You can't win against a river. The river doesn't care about your plans. The river is just doing what rivers do, flowing. And while you're holding onto that branch, gripping it with everything you have, you're not noticing something crucial. Other people are flowing past you. And some of them are terrified. Yes, some of them are drowning. Some of them are being smashed against rocks. But some of them are doing something different. They're not fighting the river. They're not trying to control it. They're not holding on to branches. They're swimming. Not against the current. That would be futile. But with it. They're learning to read the water, to feel where it's flowing, to navigate by response rather than control, to find the channels between the rocks, to surface for air at the right moments. And here's the thing, they're afraid to. They're uncertain to. They don't know what's around the next bend any more than you do. But they're alive, they're moving, they're engaged with the river instead of resisting it. And when they hit rapids, when they encounter obstacles, when things go wrong, they respond, they adapt, they adjust. They use the skills they've been developing all along: presence, awareness, flexibility, trust in their capacity to meet the moment. This is catastrophic presence. It's not the absence of fear, it's the willingness to be afraid while still being alive. It's not the elimination of risk, it's the recognition that trying to eliminate risk is itself the greatest risk, because it costs you the only thing that's real, this moment. So here's what you need to understand. You're already in the river. You've always been in the river. The branch you're holding onto, your plans, your preparations, your illusions of control, they're not actually protecting you, they're just exhausting you. And the longer you hold on, the more of your life flows past you, unrealized, unlived, unsavored. The Black Swan event you're so afraid of, it's not the real catastrophe. The real catastrophe is spending your entire life holding onto a branch, waiting for the river to stop being a river. And you're still here, which means you already know this isn't surface-level content. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. Now, you might be asking, what do I actually do with this? How do I live in catastrophic presence? And I need to be honest with you about something. There's no technique for this. There's no 5-step process. There's no life hack that lets you skip the uncomfortable parts. Because the uncomfortable part is the point. The uncertainty is the point. The not knowing is the point. But there are some things you can do, not to achieve catastrophic presence. You can't achieve it because you're already in it. You're already in the river. But to stop resisting it, to stop pretending you're somewhere else. First, notice your grip. Notice how much energy you're spending trying to control the uncontrollable. Notice how much of your mental space is occupied by planning for disasters that haven't happened and might never happen. Notice how tight you're holding onto your branch. You don't have to let go immediately. Just notice. Notice what it costs you. Notice what you're sacrificing for this illusion of security. Second, start distinguishing between useful preparation and anxious control. Yes, have insurance. Yes, save money. Yes, make plans. But do these things from a place of basic responsibility, not from a place of magical thinking. Save money because having resources is useful, not because money will protect you from loss. Have insurance because it's pragmatic, not because it makes you safe. Make plans because planning is a useful tool, not because plans determine outcomes. Feel the difference in your body? Useful preparation feels grounded, anxious control feels desperate. Third, practice being with uncertainty without trying to resolve it. This is crucial. Your mind wants to turn every unknown into a known, every mystery into a problem to be solved, every open question into a closed answer, and that impulse, that compulsive need for resolution, it's what keeps you trapped. So practice sitting with not honing. Practice being present with the questions that don't have answers, not forever, just for a moment, just long enough to realize that the uncertainty itself isn't actually killing you. Your resistance to it is. Fourth, stop rehearsing catastrophes in your mind. You think you're preparing. You think you're planning, but what you're actually doing is traumatizing yourself preemptively. You're living through disasters that haven't happened, you're experiencing losses that haven't occurred, and your nervous system can't tell the difference between a real catastrophe and an imagined one. So every time you run through these scenarios, every time you play out these disaster movies in your head, you're triggering the same stress response you would experience if the thing actually happened. You're making yourself suffer for tragedies that might never come. Fifth, cultivate presence through the body, not through the mind. Your mind will never be convinced that uncertainty is okay. It will always want more control, more preparation, more security. But your body knows something your mind doesn't. It knows how to be alive without knowing what comes next. It knows how to breathe without planning the next breath. It knows how to digest without controlling the process. It knows how to heal without micromanaging every cell. Your body lives in catastrophic presence naturally. So feel your body, feel your breath, feel your feet on the ground. Feel the reality of being alive right now, not in the hypothetical future, not in the imagined disaster, but right now, this breath, this moment. And here's what to stop doing. Stop comparing your life to some imaginary version where catastrophe never happens. Stop believing that other people have figured out how to be safe. Stop thinking that if you just found the right strategy, the right plan, the right amount of preparation, you could finally relax. You can't. That version of life doesn't exist. It never existed. It never will exist. You're chasing an illusion, and the chase is costing you the only reality you actually have. Stop treating catastrophe as the enemy. Stop seeing black swan events as interruptions to your life. Stop believing that the goal is to get back to normal, to restore what was, to return to the stable state. There is no stable state. There never was. Everything has always been in flux. Everything has always been uncertain. Everything has always been subject to forces beyond your control. The difference is that now you're starting to see it, and that seeing, as uncomfortable as it is a form of awakening. Stop waiting to live until you feel safe, because you'll never feel safe. Not really. Not if safety means the elimination of uncertainty. You could have $1 million in the bank and it wouldn't make you safe. You could have the best insurance, the best health, the best relationships, and none of it would make you safe. Because safety, in the sense you're imagining it, is a fantasy. It's not a state you can achieve. It's a story you tell yourself to avoid facing the fundamental uncertainty of existence. So stop postponing your life until after you've secured it. Stop saying, I'll do that when I've saved more money, or I'll take that risk when I've built up a bigger cushion, or I'll be more present when things calm down. Things won't calm down. The river won't stop flowing. And every moment you spend waiting for security is a moment you're not actually living. Here's the paradox. The moment you accept that catastrophe is inevitable, that control is impossible, that uncertainty is the ground of existence, you become free. Not free from catastrophe, you were never going to be free from that, but free to live in the midst of it, free to be present, free to respond, free to engage with life as it actually is, rather than as you wish it would be. This isn't resignation, this isn't giving up, this is the opposite. This is finally showing up, finally being present, finally participating in your own life instead of just managing it from a distance.